Here are the checkpoints for preparing your data for the purpose of pivot table. Number 1, ensure that there is no empty column or a column without a title in your range. Now, the first thing you should realize is that when you create a pivot table, the pivot table works with the Lego blocks, remember, as we explained, and these blocks are nothing but the title of the columns in your data range, and those titles are used by pivot table for you to play around and create different kinds of report. Therefore, it becomes necessary that you do not have an empty column or a column without a title. Let's see what exactly do I mean. Let's have an empty column here and we'll try and create a pivot table for this small data. So I'm going to click on pivot table and click OK, and we get an error message saying the pivot table field name is not valid, and that's why it will not create the table for you. So the column headers are the pivot table field name. So if you have an empty column, please delete it before starting your pivot table. Point number 2, in case there are empty rows in your data range, then either you delete them or you select the data range manually before clicking to start with pivot table. Let me explain how this works. So in case you want to manually select the entire range, then you select either the top row and use shift control down arrow key. These 3 keys on your keyboard, shift, control and down arrow key, and it will take you to the bottommost part of the data range as long as there are no empty rows. So here we know that the last cell is M2532. Now let's say what happens if there is an empty row in the middle. So let me just create an empty row here, and I go in the upper section and I click on pivot table. You will see that only the upper portion of this range, which is continuously filled, is selected. So you can either change it by dragging the range manually, or you can manually type in the last cell here, which is M2532, and click OK. So this is one way of selecting the range manually. Let's go to the point number 3. Point number 3 is check the formats and the way the data is presented, especially in the columns which you are likely to use for pivot table purpose. What exactly do I mean? Let's consider these 2 columns present in our data sheet. This is month and invoice number. In next session, I'm going to explain why the data present as it is in these 2 columns can produce inappropriate results using pivot tables. And we will also learn how to use functions which allow us to operate on text fields and convert them into a form which can be properly sorted or filtered.